Well, there's so many cases, and I'm tempted to just pick, really grand projects, things like, Wikipedia, authoring projects where, students in their teaching and learning are building, public knowledge resources that are read by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and are building an information commons and a common infrastructure that we can build on. I still get a real buzz every time I work with a student when they're working on a website for themselves, when they're taking some sort of research project and sharing it out, or building a portfolio for their work. And most weeks I find myself sitting with a student who at some point in the interaction says things like, I don't want to do this. Why would I have to build a website? This has nothing to do with my history project. And then seeing them build fluency and have fun and getting picky about the types of images that go up and the layout, and getting that sense where you can tell that they're being drawn into the experience of shaping their digital identity and getting this sense of autonomy and confidence. And then quite often at some point, seeing how excited they get when they realize that there are people reading and engaging with their work and perhaps building on their work in a way that they never imagined possible when they started out. And sometimes these are very modest interactions, but it often has quite a profound influence on the student, because the student at that point is saying, I'm not just simulating the act of scholarship here, I'm actually engaging in a global networked discourse, and my voice has value. That never gets old for me.
At the Justice Institute, we've started putting some of our courses in WordPress, and one of the reasons we've been doing that is because it allows students who actually aren't technically our students, that are just participating in their own communities, to access some of our courses. So in a way, this is our own version of a MOOC. We call them Simple Open Online Courses. And what's been inspiring about that is to actually see that we are attracting people who would never apply to be a student at our institution for a variety of different reasons. Maybe because of their educational history, they don't see themselves in a higher education institution, but they're able to participate in these courses and ultimately better contribute to their communities more locally with what they've learned in those courses. So for me, that's a real example of access, the role that an institution can play in providing greater access to people that technically aren't their own students.
Open. And one example of openness that I mean I'd have to share, but is Virtually Connecting. And Virtually Connecting is this organization that I co-founded, which helps people who cannot make it to a conference attend the conversations and be part of the conversations at those conferences. Usually conferences, when they want to involve virtual folks, they live stream whatever they've got and they just broadcast that, and that isn't the most valuable part of a conference. The most valuable part of a conference is the networking, is the meeting people in the hallways and having those spontaneous conversations. And so with Virtually Connecting, which I co-founded with my friend Rebecca Hogue, what we do is we bring people into a conversation to have the virtual folks and the on-site folks have a conversation about what's been happening at the conference. It's very similar to what you have when you bump into someone, but we schedule it so that people can commit to be there and make it. And this community, it started with Rebecca and me, but there are like over 50 volunteers who help make this happen. We live stream these on the internet. We invite anyone who wants to join in. We have a limit of how many people, so it's not open in that sense. But it's open in the sense of anybody could sign up for it, and there's so many of them that, you know, if you can't make one, you'll be able to make another one. And it involves a lot of collaboration. It involves a lot of people being open and being willing to share their practice. So the people who are at a conference, who are a keynote speaker who's willing to, you know, give their time to folks who can't be there and to listen to them and to have a conversation with them. The people on site who help organize it and make it work and use their laptops to make it work. Folks virtually who make it work and who announce it and involve other people in it and help them get used to joining that video conferencing type of thing, which we use Google for this, Google Hangouts, just because it's free. But of course, it's not about the tool. It's just about having a tool that allows us to live stream and involve people and record it and then have it available to people in most countries of the world. Having said all this, whenever we talk about open as if it's a panacea, it's not, and virtually connecting is a good example of that. So Google works on YouTube, and there are some countries that don't have YouTube altogether. It's banned. There are some countries where the internet bandwidth is so bad that someone can't join into a video conversation. There are people who have the internet and the bandwidth and everything, but that's not the way they want to connect online. They're shy, they don't want to stand in front of the camera, or they join but they feel too nervous to speak because they're speaking to someone who's a much higher profile person than them. And so just because you design something to be open and inclusive doesn't mean it will include everyone. People with certain disabilities, like if you have a hearing disability, you wouldn't be able to really use this. Just last week, I had a problem with my jaw and smiling hurt. And I was in a session where I should have been smiling because it was an announcement that was something good for me. Just in that moment, realizing that I couldn't participate the way I wanted to participate. So I mean, open is flexible, and it's contextual, and it goes up and down, and it changes, and it's maybe not even just a spectrum, but it's multidimensional. And so I think any example of openness needs to be looked at from all these different dimensions.
I guess I'd like to talk about the innovative course that my colleague Alan Levine and I have rolled out in 2 different iterations. This course is really part about digital storytelling, part about digital culture. We cover topics like electronic literature and video games and even digital art. But what's really great about it is that we teach it co-locationally, so that means that it exists in different spaces. And beyond that, there are open participants as well that are not institutionally affiliated, but on the learning journey with us. And each person who's a part of that experiment and learning is a contributor in some way. So we have an open platform, we use social media, but then there are sort of rooted exercises and experiences in the different locations that we find ourselves in. So yeah, we've done a lot with network pedagogy in this course called Network Narratives. Our hashtag is NetNar. And the other element here is a lot of composition, that is creating things, making things. And so I like to think of writing in the 21st century as something more like making, writing as making. So we have students really play and develop a sensibility of remix, and also kind of further develop a notion of participatory culture and how it works through the experience of network narratives.
The clearest example I can give you of the open web working in teaching and learning is, for the last 3 years we've been teaching reproductive biology honours students how to engage with Wikipedia. We have academic support librarians spend 3 hours working with the students, researching literature and providing information about databases that they can use to create an article on a reproductive medical term that's not represented on Wikipedia. And they do all this research and they find out all about the pros and cons of each database, bring all the scholarly literature to bear, and then they produce the article. And one of the articles that we produced in these sessions on high-grade serous carcinoma, written by one of our students, Anya Kavanagh, is one of the most deadly and most common forms of ovarian cancer. And it didn't have an article until she wrote about it. And it's now been viewed 30,000 times in the last year. So that providing some much needed health information for the benefit of the whole world, a student using their scholarship for the benefit of the whole world.
Yeah, there are very many inspiring examples of using the open web in teaching and learning. Some of the people here today will give you some wonderful examples, but what I'd like to say is that sometimes looking at the most inspiring examples inspires people to engage in very small scale practices, like opening up their classroom to to engage with students in another course or in another country, using social media to engage with authors of works that you're studying in your course, for example. So I think it's worthwhile to look at all these really inspiring examples, but I hope that what that does is inspire people to try things that are appropriate, you know, to them, to their students in the context that they're in. And I think that's probably more important than focusing just on the large-scale examples.
No, right now, because of the open web, I live in Arizona in the western U.S. and I'm teaching a class in New Jersey, and they're actually in a classroom, and more or less through, you know, a patchwork of my own WordPress site, we use social media and other tools, I'm able to interact with students who are actually in a regular classroom, and I come in on a video screen, but they're creating media. And the best thing about this is, what I most enjoy is helping people kind of unlock their own potential to do things they think they can't do. So most students think they can't create media, or perhaps audio scares them, and so when you create an exercise or an activity where they can sort of expand their own boundaries, and then they go places that I can't even imagine.